So as I said earlier, what I want to do is go through some of these codes, because this is what is covered in this particular chapter where we are looking into iterations, and we are looking into the Java syntax where we are writing our for statements. Okay, so let's look at the first line. So you have your public class printing, should be no problem there, and then you have your main method, public static void main, and then I have two for statements. Okay, so let's go through the for statements. So I'm starting with I equals 1. Okay, so if I'm looking at this code, so at this point I have I equals 1, and then my condition is I less than equals 10. Okay, and my next condition is I plus plus. Now this is the very same as, remember your while statement, where you write your while and you have a condition and you say num is less than 10. Okay, and also this is going to be considered as the body of your while, and before you do your while you also come and set up some counter, and you can probably say num is equal to 1. So once I determine my value in num, I will write my while statement and then do a condition num equals or less than equals 10. Now the same thing is written over here all in one shot, where you determine or you start your counter at the very beginning with your for statement. That's a semicolon, so that's your first line that you did over here, and then this condition number less than equals 10 is your second condition. Okay, so in this case I have my I is at 1, which is less than equals 10. Okay, so my condition is true. Okay, so if this condition is true, then I'm going to go inside my body of my for. Right, now inside I have another for statement. Right, and in this one I say int j equals 1, j is less than equals 5, j plus plus. So that's your internal for, and this one has its own body. Okay, and within your body I have a system out print line which prints the symbol at. Right, so the first time I is 1, 1 is less than 10, I go inside, I initiate another counter called j, j equals 1. So in this case my condition is 1 less than equals 5, which is true. Right, and then I'm going to go inside this for statement body, which is nested. Okay, so line number 15 and 17 is where the body of the inside for statement is, right over here. Now as long as this condition is correct, I have to keep on printing my at statement or at symbol. So the first time I print a, all right, now once I print a, I'm going to go back and increment my j, which now became 1. It used to be 1, now it became 2. Right, so 2 is less than equals 5, the condition is still true. I'm going to come in and do my at one more time. Correct, I'm going to go back, increment my j to 3, 3 less than equals 5, yes. I'm going to come inside. Remember, I'm still within the body of my inside or nested for. Okay, so I'll print another at statement like this. So I would go through how many? Less than equals 5. So I would go through 5 iteration. Right, so when it becomes 5, okay, it is actually not less than, but it is equal to 5. So that's why that condition still would hold true. So I would print 5 of these things. Now once I finish my counter or my inside nest, that is when I am going to jump outside into my next step. Right? Now remember, you're still inside your outside for loop. So once I finish the inside loop, I'm going to jump into this, and now remember it used to be 1 less than equals 10. Once I finish going through the entire thing, I'm going to increment my 1, and now this becomes 2. Now once this is true, the condition still holds true. I'm going to go inside, and I'm going to go to my second inside for one more time. Now once I go there, I'm going to start from right here. So I would start from right here. I would initiate my j to 1. 1 is still going to be less than 5. I'm going to come in and print my at. So I would continue doing this. So take a look at this. Now one thing I missed, how did I come out from here to here? Because of this line right here. So the first time when this was 1 was less than 10, I go inside my j, I follow through this j less than equals 5, print out all my a's, remember? So I do 5 of those things. Once I finish this, I'm coming out of this body within my second for. Now what's the next line within my body? This line number 19. So I have to execute this line, and this is what takes you to the next line, because look at this, system out print line. It's a blank one, but I'm still within the body of my outside for. So I cannot come outside. This is where I want to go back to my increment. So now I'm going to change it to 2. 2 is less than 10, yes, and then I'm going to come in and print another of those 5 things. It's with me? Yes.
I have a question. Would it reinitialize it back to 1 each time it goes through the loop?
Not the outside one, the inside one.
Yeah, I mean either one of them.
Nope. So once you start with this one, okay, you start with 1. 1 is less than 10. I'm going to go inside. I initialize my j. J is equal to 1. Okay. I complete my for body right here. Then I'm still inside my outside loop. So I execute this print line, and then I'm going to go back and increment my I++. So now it becomes 2. Now once I go to 2, okay, this condition is true, I'm going to go inside. Now this for gets reinitialized again. So now I start with j equals 1 again. Okay, so unless I go outside the loop, I'm not reinitializing. So technically, if you look at the loop, we say we call it a loop, but this is really what happens. When you write a for statement, and say int I equals 0, I less than 2, I plus plus, and if you have another on for int j equals 0, j less than equals 3, j plus plus. Okay. Now the sequence is really like this. You start with your number 1, number 2, then you go inside the body of the loop, right? Now once you go inside, this is number 1, this is number 2, and then you go inside if this holds to be true. Now once you execute all this, you're going to go back over here. So now the looping actually is going on between this. So this is where you go, check your condition, and you come inside. Again, execute this line, check your condition, comes back in. So this is really where the looping is happening. Okay, now once I finish the whole thing, I'm going to come outside, and then again I'm going to go over here. So the same loop continues. Look at this. Because I finished or executed everything from my inside loop, but I'm still within my outside. So I'm going to go back and come over here, increment my, it used to be 1, now it becomes 2. Okay, so the condition is still true. I'm going to come in, I'm going to reinitialize this again. So I start with 1. So only when I come outside this loop, I'm going to reinitialize. But if I don't, then I'm actually going, I start from here, 2, and this is 3. You go inside, again, same thing, 1, 2, 3, and this loop continues. You meet all your condition, you're still within your outside, you come out, then again go over here. So now it becomes 3, condition is still true, come in over here and reinitialize the whole thing. So this is really your nested loop. Now what happens, you have another loop inside. Same thing, you start with this one, you execute, or you go into this. If the condition is true, you go in here, and then if this condition is true, you go inside inside loop. Okay, now the inside loop would also have a body, and then you have to execute the inside loop completely before you can come out to the outside. Now you are not going to jump out over here, you're going to jump to the nearest outside one. Okay, and you're going to execute the whole thing and then again go over here. All right, so the more nested loops you get, the more complicated the program begins. But this is basically what is happening, and that is why if I run this program now, this is what you're seeing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm trying to get my output to come up. Anyway, it's just showing it in two different, the output is showing in different. So of course, if I change now, if you look at the output, there are 10 of these things, right? So where this 10 is coming from is from here. So if I really change this one to make it simple, 2, 3, and maybe make it 2, then the picture becomes very, very different. So if I do this, so now my outside one is controlling how many of these rows I would have, right? So my outside loop is actually controlling my rows, and the inside is controlling my column. So how many do I have? 2 of them, so that's why I get 1 and 2. Everybody with me? All right, let's move on, and this is where it gets a little tricky. Very, very quickly, another example. Now in this case, we are using a while rather than a for, and this is the one that I was just talking about earlier, how you saw that the first element of the for is actually given outside, and then you have your condition over here. So this is where your condition counter less than equals 5, this is where it's been tested, and if it is true, that is when it's going to go inside my while counter or while statement and print the counter. So I'll start off with 1. It will increment my counter, but remember, it's still within my while body. So it is not going to come outside until it goes to this counter and meets every single condition. So it's going to say 2 is less than 5, yes, it's going to go back and print the counter. So it's going to go through the whole thing, and then it's going to come outside system out print line. So that's why since this one is system out print line counter, it's all going to be printed in one line, right? Because you do not have another nested loop. As soon as it comes out, it's going to go back to the next line. So if I look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because your counter is only checking and making sure it's repeating for 5 times. Everybody good? All right. So now I want to create another new class here, and this one the same thing that we are doing here. This is the for counter. Now if you look at it, this is doing exactly the same thing, but in this one I'm replacing my replacing my while with a for statement. So now let's go ahead and run it. See, this is my for counter. If I say OK, so now it's doing the same exact thing. So what I did with my while, I basically changed it to a for statement. All right. So let's go ahead and keep adding a few more examples. So I'm going to go to create new class, and this one, remember, this is still your book examples that I'm going through. So this is your sum. So here I have another for statement. So this is my sum. So what is it doing? Should not have any problem with line number 2, public class sum. We have your static void main, and then I have my for statement starting with number equals 2. So first my counter is set at 2. Is 2 less than 20? Yes, the condition is true. And then I incremented by 2, not by 1. That's why you said plus equals 2. Now, once this condition is true, I'm going to go inside. And what is my inside of my for statement do? It is basically adding my number to my total. I initially started with a total of 0, right? So the first time it is 2. The next time I go and increment it to 4. So my 4 is still less than equals 20. I come in and add my number to this. So if I keep on adding this, then you will see that since I repeated it 20 times, I get a value of 110. Now this is going to change, this value is going to change if I repeat it less number of times, right? Now it can also change if I add something like this. So I start off with 2, I would add to 7, okay? But I'm only going to do it until it is less than equals 10. Now it's going to run it once. The next time it's going to add 7 to it. Now at this point this number becomes, or this condition becomes false, correct? So if I try running it, only 9. Remember, I started with 2, right? And then you add 7, and then it cannot do anything. So if I now change this thing, it's going to change. Everybody good? Simple for statement. Now let's add another example here. Now this is really where you're actually seeing some implementation to a solution. So what it's trying to do, it is trying to create a chart of your interest that you're going to get. So let's take a look. Here is my public class interest, and here is my main body or main method. I start off with a value of a principal. This is my variable with a value of 1000, right? I have a rate of 0.05, which is what? 5%. All right. Now, system out printf, I would print my year and my amount of deposit. But take a look at this statement right here. So this one is saying what I am trying to print is a string. And then it says 20s. This is how it is giving you that space. Okay. And then it comes back and then prints your S again, which is amount on deposit. So you have a year and then quite a bit of space and then amount of deposit. Now I go inside and I start off with year number 1. Is year less than equals 10? Yes. I come inside. Now I have this value, which is a double value called amount, which takes that principal which I have defined, which is going to start at $1,000 times power. So the math function that we use is math.power is 1 plus rate to the power year. Okay, so remember my year is 1. I'm going to go all the way up to 10. So I'm going to get it repeated for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. Now, what is this one doing here? So if I start with, let's say 1000, okay, the next time it's going to be 1050, but I don't take that principal out. I'm going to then calculate my sum, principal, and then add it to my 1050. So if I run it now, it will show you what it is going to be at the end of 10 years. Now look at the system out printf, which is %4d, which is saying that it's going to be the year, right? So the space 4d gives you some space, okay? And then 20.2f, which is telling you that this is going to be a size of 20 with 2 decimal. Okay, if I change this one to 20.3, then it makes it 3 decimals. All right, and then I'm going to print my year, and that's why it's a decimal. And then remember, this is a float, which is my amount. Okay, so let me run this. So this is what I would get. Remember my 3 decimals, right? So year 1, I got 1050. Year 2, I got 1102. Year 3, I got 1157.625. So pretty soon in 10 years, you're up to 1628. So that's your power of compounding, right? So if you don't take the principal out, it tends to grow pretty quick. Okay, so again, this is a good example showing the implementation of a for statement. Remember, initially we were just showing the counter 10, 5, see how many times it's repeated, but this is where you're actually using it towards an application. So you want to show your appreciation of 10 years. Now, some of you guys are familiar with the term depreciation? Yes? There's a formula that you can use to calculate the depreciation of your car, right? And if you research, it will tell you this is how you calculate your depreciation. So if you bought a car for $30,000 and you calculate the depreciation that you're going to get every year, you will see how many years it will take to have your car at no value whatsoever, right? So now this is kind of outside the scope. A lot of the people who are very good financially tell you that you should be really careful when you're buying a car, because that really does not add any value to it. So it's not an asset, right? It's a liability. You take it, now you get use out of it. Of course, you get your transportation and all that stuff. Yes? This one? The space from here to here. See this? Now let's try this thing, and let's say I want to see what's the difference. 5S. You'll see the space between year and amount of deposit is going to be really messed up. Okay? Because remember, you have your year and your amount of deposit. This is quite a few characters here. So if you play with this, so 5 or maybe 50, you'll see the change. This is going to move all the way to the here. So year, and then your lot of space and your amount of deposit. Okay, so let's try it. See this? So the space between year and amount of deposit is messed up. Now, can you not move this thing? Absolutely. What you have to do is, see this 4 over here? I can change this thing to 40. See, now my year got moved all the way over here. So you actually need to get more space between this and this. So this is just plain simple formatting that you're playing with. But good question, so that you know exactly what that is doing. All right, let's move on to another example. Now something very, very similar, but now I'm writing it with a do-while statement. Again, something that you have seen earlier. So I start with a counter. I have my do statement. I would complete these 2 lines, and then I will look at the comparison. So let's run this. This is what we get. Now, what is the difference between a do while and just a while? That's right. So it checks afterwards. So if this condition happened to be false, okay, I would still execute the code once, right? Because I check my while condition after my do. Whereas when I move my while, if I only have a while statement, I will check my condition in the beginning. So if I start with 1, and if my condition is not a true condition like this, then I cannot go inside my while statement. So if I now do run this one, so I still do 1, and then this one does not check to be true anymore, so I can repeat it. But I started with 1, right? I saw a hand. I saw a hand, somebody had a question. So question about this? So the difference between a do while and a while is just that you're checking the condition afterwards. So it will get executed once and then it checks the condition. Let's look at another example. Now this is something that you also had seen before. Go to my source. Now one thing that I wanted to also point out is the way I am organizing my folder structure. So I have my chapter 5 examples, and then inside I am having multiple classes. So everything is organized under that one project folder. All right. So let's try running this one. Letter grades, and they say that there's an error over here. So let's take a look. It's missing my scanner. So if I just say go ahead and add, that should take care of it. And now I should be able to run my letter grades. So enter the integer grades in the range of 0 to 100 and type the end of the file indicator to terminate the input. So basically it's telling you that if you are using your Unix, Linux, Mac OS, then you do a Control D that indicates that you are done with inputting. But if you are using a Windows, you're going to say Control Z and then enter. So when you are inputting, so you can say it says a letter grade, right? So you can say no, integer grades, not a letter grade. So I can say 66 space 79 space 89 space 88 space 77, and then I say Control Z. So now it tells me number of students who received the grade A equals 0. Nobody got an A. I got 2 B's, 1 C's, 1 D's, and no F. So let's go through the program really quickly. All right, so here is my scanner. That is why I was getting some error early on, because I want to input some grades. And then I start off my main method. Inside, I define several variables: total, grade counter, A count, B count, C count, D count, and F count. Now take a look at the way they are naming their variables. Although it is completely up to you to name your variables, it is probably a good practice to name it with some meaningful variable names. So they came up with A count, B count. All right. So they set all of those things at 0. Have your scanner statement, created an input object. This is the whole system out print line that you're writing to let people know how to interact with the program. So if you're running it with a Mac or a Linux, then the way you would indicate that's the end of your input is by pressing your Control D right here. But for a Windows, it's a Control Z. So then goes into my condition. It's my while. What is my condition check? Input, remember that's my object that I created, input dot has next. Have you seen this before? It is a method that is associated, that you are associating with your input object. Now, next chapter we're going to start looking at methods. Have you used methods already? Yes, you did. Main is a method. Okay. You have also written some simple methods when you did your classes and objects. Okay. So in this one, hasNext is actually a library method that is already written for you. You do not have to rewrite it again. Only thing you got to do is just call it. And how do you call it? By associating it with that object. So I said input.hasNext. So it's actually checking to see if you're just inputting your enter, or you do a Control-D or a Control-Z. So it would pick up your Control-D and a Control-Z and say, okay, I do not have any more. Okay. So while input has next, which means I have not encountered a Control-D or a Control-Z. I'm just inputting 66, enter, 77, enter. So I am inputting my grade. So every time I input that value 66, 96, it is stored in my grade and it's adding it to my total. So 66, 76, 92, everything has been added to the total, and then every time it adds, it also adds the grade counter, which started off with 0. So it is calculating how many grades I'm inputting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so it's counting that. Now, once I have that all settled, I'm going to now use a switch statement. Have you seen this before? Yes, you have. So now I'm saying while grade, divide that by 10. So remember, I input 66. So it divides that by 10. What do I get? 6. So then that value that you are getting, you are checking it against these cases. Does it match case 9 and 10? No. 8, no. 7, no. 6, yes. So as soon as it matches my 6, it's going to add it to my D count, right? So 66 is the D. And then I break, okay? But look, this is my while loop, which cannot get completed unless this hasNext has not met your Control-Z or a Control-D. So every time I input a number, it is going through all these things. It's going to take the value, add it to my grade, add to my counter, and then compare that grade. So the next time if I input 77, it's 77, divide that by 10. I get 7. I'm going to come inside my case 7, add to my C count. Okay? Just a minute, I'll be right there. So after I finish the whole thing, I'm going to write my grade report. Now when I write my grade report, this is what I'm doing. I'm saying if grade counter not equals 0, right? So I have 2, 3, 4. So as soon as I input the first grade, I add to my counter. What happens, and why do we need this? Because let's say it comes and asks you to input a grade and somebody inputs Control-D or a Control-Z. Now I do not have a grade counter, right? So I'm going to say there's no average to be calculated. Okay, so that's why I have this condition. While grade counter is not equal 0, you have at least 1 or 2 or 3. I'm going to calculate my average, which is nothing but my total that I kept on calculating, divide that by the grade counter. So if I inputted 4 of grades or 5 grades, that's going to be my average. So system out print line, total number of grades that I inputted is the grade counter, comma, total. And then I have a system out print line, my class average, system out print, and now this is all, see this NS, NS, you know what that means, right? Yes, no? Percent N is next line, %s is a string that you're outputting. N, again, next line, string. D is an integer. No, it's an integer. String, integer again, string, integer again. So A count, display the A grades, B count, C count, D count, or else you have no grades were entered. So if you take a look at my output right here, so look at what it did. It gave me this message, which is actually coming from line number 15, this big message. Okay, then it checks to see if I have input has next. Yes, 66, enter 79, 89, 88, 77. Okay, so I immediately go through this condition. So first time 66, I add to my D count, my 79, add to my C count, right? So I keep on adding these things. So then I do have a grade report. My counter is not equal 0. I calculate my average. So total of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 5 grades, right? So total of 4 grades entered. It's 322. Class average is 80.5. Number of students is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Add another example. So everybody good with the switch statement? Showing you how to go through the switch, input your values. Let's take a look at, now this is also an implementation towards your class and object. So let's take a look at this one. So this one is an auto policy, and we're going to open it with a notepad. And everybody's familiar with what I'm doing, right? I'm just basically using Notepad to open it up and then create my class. So I'm going to come over here in source, new, do a class, and I'm going to call it auto policy, and come in over here, do this. And I'm going to go in because I got to create a test because this is an object. So another class, and I'm going to call it auto policy test. Finish. All right. Oops. Return type. Okay, let's run it. Okay. Public class. Oh, I missed my public static void main string argument. All right, now it should be all good. Okay, now let's go ahead and, all right. So this is already running, but let's take a look at the program before we come back to the executed code. So here is my class that I set up. Remember, this is the one where I do not have a main method. I'm just setting up my class, and I'm going to create objects out of it. So here are my 3 variables, and they're all private. One is an account number, the other one is a string, and the other one is state. I create, what is this? Constructor. Thank you. How do you know it's a constructor? same name as my class. Now, does the constructor have arguments? Yes. It has what? 3 arguments. One is an integer, one is a string, the other one is a string, right? So int account number, make, model, and state. What do I do? So the values that I would get from this object, once I create my object, is going to be assigned to my account number, make, model, and state. Okay. Now, I also have set account number and get account number, right? So I have set and get for every single variable right here. Okay. So this is my set get, and I showed you both in NetBeans and Eclipse that you can use your get set method to generate all your get set methods. Now, the thing that we wrote over here is this method right here. It says public boolean is no fault state. How do I know this is a method? Because it has an open close parenthesis right afterwards. Does it take any argument? No. All right. So public means it can be seen. Boolean, what does that mean? Thank you. So it's not a void, right? So it's going to return a true or a false. Okay. So as soon as I have a return value, what should always happen in that method? It should always have this return statement, be it an integer, be it a double, whatever be it. So as soon as you say public double or public int, your last statement out of that method should be a return statement. If you do not have it, you have something wrong. Now, what do I do here? So inside my method, I declare another variable, and this one is a Boolean variable. And then I have a switch statement which says switch get state. Okay. So what is this get state method? This is the method right here. Okay. So anytime I assign something into that object, I can extract that value by calling in get state. So now I have cases Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. So there are only 4 places that I'm going to continue, that I'm going to compare with the switch statement. So all my case statement written like this. Okay. Now if it matches any of those 4 states, I'm going to come back and assign the value true to my no fault state. Okay. I would break out of it, but if it does not match any of these 4 states, then I'm going to assign a false. And then I'm going to return my no fault state Boolean variable. Is it a true or a false? All right. Simple. So now let's go to the no fault state. This is where I write my test class. I have a main method, and then this is my object that I create out of my class called auto policy that I just wrote earlier. Remember, that's my blueprint. Now my blueprint has all my get set methods, and it also has a constructor. And if you remember, the constructor would take in 3 values, right? You have your integer and your 2 strings. So I created this new auto policy 11111 Toyota Camry, New Jersey. Auto policy Ford Fusion ME. And then I'm going to take this policy in no fault state. This is another method which I'm writing over here. Very similar to what you have seen before in some of the other ones. Remember that display method that we were doing? So that you don't have to write the system out for everything. So I would take that, set up that method, and put my object that I have created, auto policy 1, policy 2, and it's going to run it through my no fault state. So let's take a look at this. So here's my policy in no fault state. This is a void. This is also a static method, which means I can run it without having to create an object out of it. And this is also public. What's my argument? Only one argument, and this is actually an object that I'm passing. So it's an object called policy, which is of the type auto policy. Remember, after my class. So system out print line, the auto policy, and system out print line, I'm going to get my account, which is going to be this 1111, and then my state, and then my no fault. So then I would say policy dot get account number, policy dot get make and model, policy dot get state, and then it says policy dot is no fault question mark here. If it is true, then it's going to say is. If it is not, it's going to pick up is not. So when I create these two objects, and these are my two states, I can say if this is a false state or no false state. Okay, so here is your output. Auto policy 1 car state New Jersey is a no fault state, and state ME is not a no fault state because it did not match those 4 things. Remember the 4 states that we wrote here. So only MA, NJ, NY, and PA. ME is not one of them. All right. Question here. We're good? Okay. And I think I have one more left. And this is going to be really quick. It's just showing you the use of a break and a continue. I'm going to go back to source, new class. We'll do break. All right, let's take a quick look. So when I have a break statement, it's telling me that when I have a for statement, remember my count, my initial counter, 1 less than 10, it is true, goes inside and checks this condition. So the first time it is not true, so I cannot go inside my if statement. The second time around it is 2 less than 10, yes. Is it equal to 5? No. So that's why it keeps on coming out and print my count. Okay, so 1 2 3 4, so it keeps on counting. As soon as it encounters this becomes true, so when my count increments to 5, then this condition becomes true. Then I hit my break statement and it would take me out of my if condition and also my for condition, my if condition, and take me out over here. So broke out of the loop at count 5. Okay, now the same thing I can do if I do this one, and it does it a little differently. So break is going to take you out, and this one is going to just skip that number. Okay, so the other example is actually test continue, and they do the exact same thing but change the continue. So what you see over here is 1 2 3 4, and then you're not getting the 5 because it says continue. It's skipping and taking you to the next iteration. So 6 7 8 9 and 10, and of course this is the one. This is actually broke out of loop. It is executed right afterwards. It's really nothing is. This should not be actually even here. You guys with me? All right. And the very last one is that logical operator. This is basically showing you the ands and the ors. Go through it. I don't think it is difficult at all. What I want to show you is one simple example which is not in the book. Let's just look at this one really quick and then we'll end. All right, so this is a program where I'm actually utilizing some iteration, okay, and it's also an application. Now, all the examples that we had seen earlier, some of them were just testing, like, what's a for statement. So we wrote a for statement with a counter, a while statement with a counter. There are about 2 or 3 applications that are actually implementing some of the concepts. Okay, the reason I say this is you will see more of your assignments where I'm going to ask you to be a little more creative and say, okay, incorporate or implement some of the concept into a working solution. Okay, so this one is actually an application. That's why I kind of picked out that example where I said, okay, I learned a lot about my for loops and my if loops and things like that. How can I now come up with a problem and then create or design a solution towards it? So my problem is, if I were to write this one, and this is going to be helpful for your project that you guys are doing, where you have to create your own problem statement. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to see if I can ask the user to input 2 digits, let's say 1 and 5, okay, and then I want to tell them what are some of the intermediate or in between digits. So if somebody says 1 and 5, I'm just going to say, okay, the digits in between are 2, 3, 4 and 5. So this is an application, right? So I created an application where it's going to do this. So let's take a look at the problem. Let's take a look at the solution that I designed. Called it in between. My main class, this is nothing new, keyboard, I just call it KB. Okay, this is my input scanner. Now it tells me I have an error here, which is basically it's missing my import statement. That should take care of that. All right, so now I have some of the variables that I defined, num1, num2, and int called difference. I also define an int called x, and you'll see why. So I ask the user to input a number. Okay, so I take the value by using my next int, since it's an integer number, associate that with my KB, that's my input object, and store it in num1. I ask you to input another number, take that value, store it in num2. Then I calculate a difference, num1 minus num2. Okay, now I have a little if statement over here. It says if the difference is greater than equals -1 and the difference is less than equals 1, then I say there are no integers between this, else the numbers in between are these. So let's take a look. So the numbers in between num1 and num2. So I have an if condition and an else condition. Okay, so the first time I say if my number 1 is greater than number 2, I'm going to go inside my for and I'm going to assign that second value as x, and I'm going to say as long as this value is less than number 1, I'm going to increment and then system out print line the value. Okay, else this is going to happen. So let me run this and show you how this is going to work. I don't want that. Still says it is having some issues, Java. Line 35. Wow. Maybe I have an extra one. Okay, so I input 22, another integer 55. All right, the numbers between 22 and 55 are 23, 24, all the way up to 54. Okay, so this is the situation where I have this part covered, right? So I said if num1 greater than num2, is it? No. Okay, else, so this is not like this. So this is my for statement. I start off with my num1 plus 1, then x equals num2. So remember, this was my 23 less than 55. I'm going to come in system out print line x, so I'm going to say 23, right? Then I'm going to go back, increment it. 24 is 24 less than 55. Yes, I'm going to print out 24, right? 25 is 25 less than num2. Okay, now let me run this again. 22 and 22. There is no integers between 22 and 22. Whereas this one, this is right over here. It's getting caught right over here, right? I don't have to go through it line by line, but I'm just showing you the different use of all the lines. All right, let's run it again. 22 and 23. Oops, cannot finish it. 22 and 23. No integers between 22 and 23. 22 and 12, right? Now this is actually getting caught at num1 is greater than num2, right? So 22 and 12, I have 13 all the way up to 21. Okay, so showing you the different places where you're catching, there is no digit, there is a digit but the first one is less than the second one, or this one where the first one is less than, the first one is greater than the second one. All right, so here are some applications of using your if, else, for. Now here is my if statement, and then I have a for statement inside. Now this if goes with else. Once I catch my else, I have a for statement that goes with this else statement right here. So here is an application that is actually utilizing some of the things that we discussed in this chapter.